Hello, and welcome to my podcast. My name is Merete, and this is my very first podcast, and it will be about knitting. I'm a bit nervous, so I hope you will bear over with me. It's probably just here in the beginning that I'm a bit shaky. This podcast is going to be an introduction about me and my knitting universe. I'm very inspired by Stephen West, if you know him, and you will find a lot of similarities in the way that I knit and in the colors I choose. So if you know Stephen West and like him, you're probably gonna think that my podcast is interesting too. I hope so. I have chosen to do this podcast in English because I find that many of my followers on Instagram are also English speaking, and I want to reach out to everyone to look into the way I knit things. And I want to start out by telling you a bit about why I'm here today doing what I'm doing. And it's actually not been that long that I've been knitting. I've been knitting for almost 1.5 years for where I've been knitting really a lot. And it's because I've been on sick leave with stress. I got sick in the beginning of 2018, and before that I did knit. I was taught knitting when I was approximately 8 years old. I've been knitting on and off until now, but I like the knitting part, and when starting out a new project, but I got bored with it really fast, and I found that it was because it was either stockinette stitch all the way, and I get bored with that, or it was the same color all throughout. So when I got sick, I had this desire of starting knitting again, and I've been browsing the internet looking for something interesting to knit that was a bit more exciting than I'm used to. And somehow I saw this picture that Stephen West is very known for, where he got this exploration station scarf wrapped around his face. And it was very different from anything I'd seen before, both in like the styling of the picture, the colors, the different techniques. And I was like, wow, I gotta look into what this is. I pretty fast I decided to get yarn for exploration station shawl, and that was my first knit I did when I was sick. And I was very much blown away by this pattern because it was using garter stitches, which I hadn't been used before in that way. That was more like how you was taught to knit when you were a child. Then you knit in garter stitch, but actually using it in a pretty design, I'd never seen that before. And it was so easy doing all these stitches, and I loved how he was doing the short rows and exaggerated his turns with the yarn overhauls. And I loved that for once in whatever I've been knitting, I could knit something in more than one color, so I didn't get bored. And there were so many techniques I learned too. Maybe you would also call me a bit of a brave person in that moment, because for you people who know Exploration Station, there is some brioche knitting in it, and I don't know. I just do it. I just try it out. I'm not that word a person, and I use YouTube a lot to learn techniques. And from then on, I was knitting more of his designs, and got curious about everything, like how he was putting colors together, and his techniques and things like that. And I was beginning to using the library quite a lot too, to borrow books and check out different techniques. I have probably always been a person that likes to learn new things, so instead of sitting in the couch and being sad about that I was on sick leave and there were a lot of things I couldn't do anymore, then I could get some energy boost and some happiness when I was learning myself new knitting techniques. And well, actually, before I got sick, I was doing these small plates with hammer pearls that I was putting them into and making a decoration for Christmas or whatever. And I found that my brain can't do that anymore, because that would mean that I would have to look at a picture, look at the plate and see where I would put the pearl, and finding the right pearl in maybe I had a box with a lot of different colors, and like sorting that out and placing it the right place and looking back and forth. That was way too difficult for my brain. So, but with knitting, they were like short instructions, and even though it looked difficult, then there was so much repetition anyway, but it was for a shorter while, so with Stephen West's patterns, so I didn't get bored. And that's kind of how I started knitting a lot. And so as I was home on sick leave, I have a lot of time on my hands knitting, and it's been really good for me, as I haven't been developing a depression. A lot of people with stress develop stress or depression, but I've been able to be pretty happy most of the time, and yeah, so that was kind of how it all started with my knitting. And then last summer I was very fortunate to meet Stephen West in Denmark. He was at a knitting festival called Knit and Jazz, and I attended a workshop, and and also he was speaking about shawls. I was attending that too. And I also, before I came to the workshops, I had been starting to becoming so brave that I was altering the designs or the knitting patterns that I was using. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. And I was working through what my future career was, because the career that I have had, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna switch a little back to my previous story, and then I'll come back to the workshop with Stephen West. I've always been working with IT. I've been doing quite complex requirement specifications, and I've been doing some project management too. so it's been really complex work and a lot of structure and a lot of analytic thinking, and it's all been up in my brain. And because I got this, I got stress, and I have some issues in my brain. It's kind of like when you break your arm and you wait for it to heal. That's kind of how it is inside my brain right now. It's there are things that I can't do. I have really a lot of trouble sitting in front of a computer screen. I can sit approximately 1 hour, maybe 1.5, 2 hours, depending on what I'm doing, and then my brain is fried, basically. So I kind of find that it's going to be really difficult for me to return to the things that I used to do. But in a way, I don't mind, because I've always been really creative, and I really wanted to do development of any kind. And in the last couple of years, that's been really difficult in my job. So it was just a really big relief to me that with the knitting, there were no boundaries. There were nobody telling me that I couldn't do this and that. It was totally up to me. And so in a way, the knitting has helped me find myself, basically. And then I reminded myself of things that I was doing as a child, and actually I was doing clothes for my dolls. And later on, I've been actually been sewing some clothes for myself. And I don't know, somehow doing the clothes design is really appealing to me. So I don't think much about what I did and what I've been doing in a lot of years. I'm more tuned into what will this creativity do on the long run for me. I can't plan my future, but I can follow more what I like to do. So yeah, that's kind of how things were developing. And last summer, as I met Stephen West, I was very curious to talk to him about how he got into knitting and how he does the design process, mainly because he doesn't have a education within design and construction, and despite that, he managed to construct things that people are really into. And I think it's really interesting how you can think in art, like in squares and triangles and directions, and just because you make increases, you can switch the directions, or if you do a certain kind of techniques, you can also make certain directions in the knitting. And if it just is loose and it flows on you, it can be really nice on you. And I don't know, I think all these art kind of ways to construct clothing is inspiring, really inspiring to me. So I had the opportunity to talk to Stephen and ask him how he did it. And he said that most of all, he didn't plan ahead. he just let the design process come to him. And as I'm a planner kind of person, I always been, I had experienced that I wanted to have a complete picture in my mind on how the colors would interact and when I was changing colors and all that when I was knitting, for instance, his shawls. And it was really a hard thing for me to do because there wasn't room for it in my head. So he got this way of saying that you have to design as you go, and I have tried to adopt this way, and it's working for me like half the time. But it's been a really good thing to like jump into that kind of way of thinking, because it's more relaxing in a way, and it's also a very fun process because you don't always know how things is gonna turn out. So that was a really good thing for me to learn. And also he said that if I wanted to publish my patterns or end up publishing my patterns, I should start writing down what I was doing. So I've been practicing that skill ever since. Yeah, so that's shortly what that was about. So after the workshop, I went home, and like one day I just had this idea that I needed a lot of necklaces, but I didn't have one. I have any necklaces that I can just like, put more around your neck. And I was like, I can knit one and make that look nice. So if you have followed me, you've probably seen this necklace. That was a thing that I did in like 1 or 1.5 days. And I wrote down everything that I was doing, and then I brought it to my knitting group, and then one in my knitting group, she has a shop, and she was like, you have to make a pattern for that, and we can make some kits that we can sell at festivals. So I was like, okay, that's kind of crazy that they actually really like what I'm doing. So so that was actually my very first pattern that I did. And the way I did it was that I was knitting welts, and because I wanted it to shine, I used gold thread, and also I was putting yarn in with there was like small sequences in this. Maybe I can find one I can show you. Whoops. Here. And also silk mohair that like was in 3 different kind of colors that was in a range like from light to dark, so it would have this really cool effect. And I used some of the techniques that I've learned from Steven, and I also used some new ones. I used drop stitches to make it shape like kind of like a oval or an egg, I think. And these picot bind offs was also something that I had been knitting before in one of Steven's designs, so I got familiar with that technique. And this design has been published on Ravelry. And I should probably also say that this podcast is not about me wanting to selling my designs. That is very important for me. I'm doing this podcast because I really, really want to let you know how I work and letting you into my universe of knitting. And maybe I can inspire you to change some of the things that you're doing. Or maybe you want to inspire me by sending pictures or messages of whatever that you think that I would find interesting. So I don't have any commercial purposes in doing this podcast. So just if you weren't sure about that. But I will be talking about my designs in the podcast because at the moment I rarely knit anyone's patterns anymore. If I do knit other patterns, it's because I want to learn a technique, or because I need something that are more of a relaxing knitting project. That because sometimes it can be hard when you have to continuously think about what are you gonna do next, So once in a while I do knit things that are more easy for me to do. Yes. So I'm just gonna look over my notes here. So I want to talk a little about what inspires me in my knitting projects, and then I'm gonna show you some of my projects, some that I have finished and some of my future projects. My stash, first and foremost, of yarn is not that big. I will do a podcast on where I will show you my stash. My stash contains a lot of different colors, and I don't have a lot of skeins in where I have more than one skein in the same color. The way that I shop is that I go into a yarn store and browse around, and if I find any yarn that I fall in love with, I buy it. It's usually the colors that attracts me. At the moment I'm a lot into bright red, bright orange, pinkish colors, and also mint green colors, light mint green colors, but also other colors, and it can also be yarn with silver thread in it, or sequences that I buy. Especially last year, I had a period where I put like glitter yarn into everything that I was knitting. Like this one, silver, and like I have in all kind of colors and gold. I also have things like this with different colors that I've been knitting with. So I just love really bright colors, and I love sequences and glitter yarns and things like that. I also like mohair yarns. It's kind of different if I'm using them or not. That it depends on the expression I want. And then I'm inspired of pictures. I use Pinterest and Instagram a lot, and if I see something that catches my eyes, it can be a technique or a color or something like that, I save the picture, and sometimes I print it out just to go and look at it, and I feel that I have to incorporate that in some time, but I don't know in what project or what I'm gonna do with it. And so pictures and yarn inspires me, and also other people's projects inspires me. And then I have a really weird brain, I think, because when I'm going to sleep, or if I'm resting somewhere or going for a walk, I can get this vision in my head of a design that could be fun to do. I usually either go and digest on that idea for quite some time. It keeps coming back and forth, and I'm thinking of different techniques and colors and things like that. And then I also draw my designs, not in detail usually, but kind of like this, where I put some notes in, and it's just kind of a sketch. And this particular drawing, I haven't been doing the design, but I have been doing something that looks similar to it. And I find that maybe it can be a good idea just to draw more drawings, because my idea sometimes develops. One of the patterns I released recently, I've been having the idea in my head for quite some time, and it has been looking a lot of different ways. And like one day it was just boom, this is how it's gonna look, and I didn't have any doubts anymore. And so I just had to knit that. So that's kind of how I work. And then I also want to tell you that I'm on a very steep learning curve. As I only recently started knitting. I'm not that experienced in knitting. I'm really keen to learn, and I use a lot of YouTube videos and books that I borrow on the library, and make tryout of different things, and then I just kind of learn and design as I go. I'm not really nervous about what I'm doing, and I'm not. I don't mind Ravelrying my things if it doesn't turn out the way that I had pictured in my head. I feel that when I unravel something, I have learned something new. So I try to bring that into my work, so I don't get annoyed with having to unravel things. Yes. Now I've been talking a lot, and I want to show you some of my things, because now you probably are a bit interested in seeing more of what I do than hearing what I'm telling. First of all, I want to talk to you about the necklace that I'm wearing. This is also an idea that came right after the other necklace that I did. I haven't been writing a pattern for this one because I don't know, it's really odd looking, and either you hate it or you like it. But I just had this idea that you could knit sideways, making welts, and then you could do the, if I turn it this way, maybe it makes more sense. And then you could do the drop stitches larger and larger to make it wider in between. And I did bind off stitches here, and then I casted on new stitches here, and then I continued knitting it downward. So it's actually just knit this way. and then I sewed it nice together in the neckline, and all the loose ends I just decided to make fringes as a kind of a design feature. And again, I used more than one color. Can you tell? I don't know. I hope so. I have more than one color here. Two colors of mohair and one color of a lace weight yarn going together. And that's actually one of the other things that I learned of Steven. And you probably know that if you twist some yarn around, you kind of get an idea of how it's gonna look when you knit it. And so I use that technique a lot before I decide what colors I want to use together. And that's pretty cool. So I think that fits with my outfit today, because when I was going to do this podcast, I was thinking about maybe I should wear something of some of my knits, but many of my knits are actually pretty warm right now, and I don't have that many summer knits, so that's kind of how this turned out. Yes, and then I have some things here that I could show you, because as I told you, I'm a lot into mint colors right now, and I did this. It's actually a summer top. That was the only one I have right now. This it's knitted from super mohair yarn. See here, from Mayflower. Super kid silk, one strand, you knit with one strand and only 3 skeins of these. And the reason why I decided I wanted to knit this was that I found a picture and it was really adorable. It's called Cecilia, and it's got these kind of heart-shaped hole in it that I liked a lot. And then I wanted to try out how it was to knit in mohair, a whole t-shirt in mohair. What I don't like a lot about this is the rib at the bottom. It's too wide, and also it comes down on my arm too long. So if I like do this, put my arm in the air, it just kind of pulls the shirt all the way up. And I actually ripped a hole in it because I did it one day, so I had to like sew it really tight under the arm so it would hold. So this was kind of both a teaching project to me, and also because I found that the pattern was really cute and romantic, so that's why I decided to do this. And also the colors are really something that I'm into at the moment. And okay, so the video recorder stopped, probably because it thought I was been speaking to a long time. So I think what I didn't get into to it was that I started to showing you this knit. It has become a cropped cardigan, and it's inspired of a Rowena jumper, puff cardigan, and a Lilly cardigan. And I will write down below what the patterns are. This knit is improvised. I didn't use a pattern. So I have been reknitting it like 4 times at least to get the right amount of stitches. And I also had Actually, I should tell you that in one of the first versions, I was knitting a rowland, but for some reason my rowland goes very sideways. So when I get down to when the yoke has a depth where I can separate for the arms, it usually gets really wide. I don't know why that happens, and you probably have the same experience. Some of you probably have the same experience. I'm learning all about Rowland at the moment. I'm not really good at it because of this, so I'm trying to learn what is going on. So I ripped that out, the first version, because of that, and decided that I wanted to be inspired of the Rowena jumper, where you make increases on the sleeve side, but don't do it on the body for a while. I've been doing this for like 10 rows, and then I started doing the increases on both sides, and I kind of like that detail that it comes down a bit, the raglan, before it goes out sideways under the arm. And then I also worked many versions to try to get the rib where the right side stitch was following down in the raglan, because I kind of find that feature is really cool. That's kind of the small details that I really enjoy about knitting, is when you can work in things like this. And so I did that on the back side too. So that. And my intention was to knit it like it looked like the puff cardigan, but I quite fast got bored with knitting stockinette stitch, especially because it's a cardigan where you knit top down and then you knit backwards, where you have to purl all the way back. So I was inspired by Lilly cardigan and the what is it called? I think it's called a fisherman's rib technique. It's kind of a brioche technique, but on the wrong side you knit all stitches, and when you get to the right side you purl one stitch, and then you purl one stitch, and then you knit into the stitch below, and then you can kind of get this in Danish it's called fake brioche, because you don't actually do the brioche knitting, but you can fake it by knitting in the stitch below, actually doing a rib on the right side and then knitting in the stitch below when you are knitting one stitch, and then purling the next stitch, and then knitting in the stitch below in the next. So that's kind of how that works. And then I ran out of yarn and I had to do a cropped cardigan, and I just need to get some buttons for it, but I really like that. It's okay. And I also wanted to try out how to do a puff cardigan, because I have a design in mind where I want to do puff sleeves. So I wanted to try how that works. Actually, I could have used more stitches here so the puff would get more big. It's not really, when I wear it, I can wear it. You can see how it looks like on me. I have to, I'm gonna take this one off. I have to kind of put the arms really high to get the puff. You can see it all falls down on me. but I like the cardigan and I'm gonna use it a lot, but this is teaching me things. That's kind of how I feel the knitting is for me, that I can't always find all things by reading books and looking up YouTube tutorials. I also have to make my own mistakes and try it out in my own hands to see how it works out. So I'm satisfied with this cardigan. It's really cute on the back. And then I just need buttons for it. But it's not perfect, but that's okay. I like it a lot. Yes, and the last thing I want to show you, I'm quite excited about actually, and it's a finished design, one of my own designs that I've been doing, that I finished like almost 3 weeks ago, and I'm going to write a pattern for this. But because of my damaged brain, that's gonna take a while. So if you're interested, then you just have to bear over with me. But again, it's colors that I really adore. And the fringes, again, I don't know why I'm into fringes, but I just am. What's fun about this knit is that there are no weaving in ends at all. There's only like the cast on thread and the end thread, but it's knitted sideways and in a round. So you start casting on for the sleeves and then you just work your way in to the middle, and then you make increases here at the arms. It's like over the elbows, or like this below your shoulders. You start making increases, and then when you reach the shoulder, stop making increases at the top, and then you open up in the bottom, so you stop knitting in a round, and then you knit to the neckline, and then you stop making increases at the bottom, so it doesn't the direction is horizontal here, just like the neckline. And then you just repeat what you did on the other side, just opposite. And it's knitted in sheet stitches, and in Danish it's called pearl stitches, so I might name it something with pearls. I think I will. And it's reversible. What is the front can be the back. And I really like the details of it. For instance, I've just knitted stockinette net stitch at the beginning, and then it folds around like an I-cord, and then I deliberately uses I-cords in the neckline. Well, is it called the edge I-cord? Something like that, I think. Stephen West uses this kind of techniques a lot in his shawls, and you just slip the last 3 stitches, and then you turn your work, and then you knit the stitches, and it kind of just folds over. And to get this garment to look like this, I have used a lace weight thread like this one. This is the one I used. It's from Handdyed.dk, a Danish dyer. She also makes her own knitwear designs, and this one is number 17 if you're interested. And it's got this really cool speckles in bright orange and pink. I use this lace weight yarn throughout the sweater, and you could have used like a mohair or another like not a hand dyed lace weight yarn. You could have used that too. And then I knit it together with the marling technique. I use a fingering weight yarn, and what I do is that I knit like 2 rounds with the lace weight yarn, and then another yarn, and then I add a new yarn, knit the stitches in below here, in between, I mean, and then I stop knitting with the first stitch, and then I knit 2 rounds with the new stitch. But this one keeps following the project all the way around. I don't take that out at all. So every time I change threads, which I do on every second round, I leave in an end that makes the fringes, and I don't have to sew in everything, because every time I add a new color, I just knit the stitches in between here, and then I lose the first color, and then it's kind of sewn in by itself, so I don't have to do anything here. So that's a really cool feature that I use all the way around. Yeah, I think that's about what I have to tell about this sweater. It's really a good fit around my shoulders anyway. It falls down exactly where it's supposed to on my shoulder. And because it's got so many colors in it here in the red family color scheme, I can use it almost to anything I have. I've been using it a lot lately. And yeah, there's also this really cool detail in the middle where I've used stockinette stitch, and I just wanted to something that was a little bit different from the seed stitch, and also I didn't change colors at this point, so I knit a stockinette stitch for like 5 centimeters, and then to get the fringes going on, I just broke the yarn anyways and added it again, so I could keep on having the fringes in this middle section. I don't know if I remember to say everything about this sweater now. There's one thing I want to say is that I'm really have a trouble working with different colors. I don't know, it's probably because I've never worked with colors like that before, that I don't have a natural way of looking at colors and seeing that these two work good together. So I found that is really difficult for me. So I have started looking or saving pictures of when I can see something look good together, and so I can get inspired of those colors, and so that is helping me. And I'm also working with the color circle right now, so if I have a new design in mind and I'm looking at colors, I will go and look at the color circle to see which colors can I choose to work with this. If I've decided to work with this one color, I use that. So I guess that's kind of why I'm so hooked on these two colors at the moment, because I found that they work really good together in the colors circle. So that's pretty cool. So when I put together clothes, it's also been inspiring to me to try out new colors when I choose my clothes in the morning. Yes, I think I will end this podcast now. I've been talking for quite some time, and I think I will have a lot more to talk about in the future. I'm always looking into new designs, and I work most of the time. I work pretty fast, except when I'm not feeling good. So I will have lots to show and hopefully inspire you. But some of the things that I've planned on doing podcasts about is my past projects and how I might work on two projects at the same time, because I'm getting inspired of one to do the other, and show you more about that process. And I will also talk about my stash, show you that. And I'm also going to show you or talk about if I attend any workshops. I have another, actually two Steven West workshops that I'm attending in July at Yarn Freak in Denmark. And probably have something exciting to talk about there. And I'm also going to show you more about my purchases and why I purchase the way I do. So I'm really happy that you have been watching my podcast, and if you like what you have seen, then maybe subscribe to my podcast so you can see when I put one more up. And also, if you like it, put a thumbs up for me. And sorry because you've seen me being so nervous, and I hope I'll get more used to being behind the camera. And again, thank you so much for watching, and see you again. Have a nice day. Bye bye.